I'm about to tell you something that still shocks historians today. How did an entire civilization manage to build eternal monuments and thrive for thousands of years in the middle of one of the hottest deserts on the planet? Ancient Egypt was a world of scorching sun, red-hot stone, and almost complete absence of natural shade. In such conditions, survival seems impossible, and the development of a high culture. They didn't just endure the heat, they learned to control it. The Egyptians developed a comprehensive system where every element of daily life was subordinated to a single goal: staying cool. Architecture, clothing, daily routines. Watch the video to the end to learn how the Egyptians built their houses to catch the wind, why their clothing was more effective than modern technology. What if I told you that for the ancient Egyptians, the sun was not their absolute enemy? To understand their methods of survival, you first need to understand their worldview. They did not try to defeat the desert or hide from the heat. They saw it as an inevitable part of the universe. At the same time, they were well aware of the flip side of this power. The desert, or Deret, the red earth, was a realm of chaos and destruction, contrasting with Kemet, the black, fertile land near the Nile. Their entire life was built on the balance between these two forces. Instead of fighting the climate, they sought harmony with it. This philosophy, known as Mat, the principle of order, truth, and balance, permeated everything. Adapting to the heat was not just a practical necessity, but part of maintaining the universal order. This approach defined their strategy: not resistance, but integration. They did not build airtight fortresses, but created permeable structures that breathed with the desert. They did not stop working, but integrated their labor into the natural rhythms of the daily heat. This worldview allowed them to observe and borrow solutions from nature itself. They saw how coolness is retained near water and how air moves. These observations formed the basis of their ingenious engineering. It was this psychological foundation that allowed them to develop technologies that are still impressive in their effectiveness today. They accepted the heat as a given and turned it from a deadly threat into a controllable factor in everyday life. Their homes, clothing, and habits were not just a set of life hacks, but a unified, holistic system of survival, born out of a deep respect for the power of the sun. This system proved so successful that it allowed their civilization to exist for millennia. We would love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about this philosophical approach to climate? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next explorations of ancient technology. Are you ready to learn the truth about how one river became a giant cooling system for an entire country? Egypt's survival would have been absolutely impossible without the Nile. But its role was much broader than just a source of fresh water and fertile silt. The river was a natural temperature regulator. The most obvious factor was evaporation. The huge mass of water flowing through the scorched desert acted as a giant evaporator. This process saturated the dry desert air with moisture and significantly lowered the temperature in the coastal zone. Life was concentrated in a narrow green strip along the river. This black earth was not just a place for agriculture, it created a microclimate in itself. The abundant vegetation, made possible only by the Nile, provided shade and further cooled the air through the evaporation of moisture from the leaves. The seasonal flooding of the Nile, or Akhet, was not just the beginning of the agricultural year for the Egyptians, but also a period of natural coolness. When water covered vast areas, it led to a significant drop in temperature, giving the country a respite from the most intense heat. The Nile was the main transport artery. Traveling by boat and barge was not only efficient, but also much less tiring than walking across the scorching ground. This saved energy and prevented overheating during travel or cargo transportation. The river provided constant access to water for domestic needs. The ability to bathe regularly in wet fabrics was critical for personal cooling. Cleanliness and hygiene, elevated to a cult status. The Nile was not only a source of life, but also a key building material: clay. It was from river silt mixed with straw that the Egyptians made their mud bricks. This material had unique properties that were ideal for the hot climate. The contrast between the Nile Valley and the surrounding desert was striking. Just a few kilometers from the cool greenery, a lifeless, scorching expanse began. The Nile created a habitable oasis, a safe bubble of coolness in the middle of a fiery ocean. The Egyptians understood the value of the river perfectly well. They deified the Nile in the image of the god Hapi, who gave them not only food, but also the very opportunity to exist in this harsh land. The river was their main ally in the struggle for survival. But water was only half the battle. To survive away from the riverbank, special protection was needed. In the next chapter, I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of Egyptian textiles, how they managed to create a fabric that cooled the body. How do you think life away from the river differed from life on its banks? I will reveal the most closely guarded secret, why the clothing of the ancient Egyptians was a brilliant technological solution. When we look at the images, we see simple white fabric, but behind this simplicity lies a whole science, perfected to perfection. The key to everything was one plant, flax. The choice of flax was not accidental. Unlike wool, which insulates heat, or cotton, which absorbs and retains moisture, flax has unique properties. Its fibers are hollow inside, which makes the fabric incredibly light and breathable. The main secret of flax is its hygroscopicity. It is able to quickly absorb moisture from the surface of the skin and evaporate it just as quickly. This process essentially mimics natural perspiration, creating a constant cooling effect. The body remained dry and evaporation carried away excess heat. Egyptian weavers achieved incredible skill. They created linen fabrics so thin that they were called woven air. Some samples found in tombs exceed modern machine-made fabrics in density. This translucent fabric was almost imperceptible on the body. Color was also crucial. Egyptians wore mainly white or very light-colored clothing. White has the highest reflectivity, repelling most of the sun's rays and preventing them from heating the body. It was a simple but incredibly effective physical principle. The cut of the clothing itself was designed for maximum ventilation. Men wore a shaniti, a simple loincloth that left the torso exposed. Women wore a kalaziris, a straight sheath dress, often with one or two straps. The clothing did not restrict movement and allowed air to circulate freely. This clothing was not only functional, but also hygienic. Linen has natural antibacterial properties, which slowed down the growth of bacteria in hot climates. In addition, linen clothing was easy to wash and quick to dry in the sun. Pleated garments were made for the nobility. These numerous folds were not just decoration. They created an additional air layer between the fabric and the skin, further enhancing ventilation and the cooling effect with the slightest movement. The process of producing such fabric was incredibly laborious. The flax was harvested, soaked in water, dried, crushed, beaten, and combed. Only then were the finest threads spun from the fibers. This technology was one of the main achievements of civilization. Thus, Egyptian clothing was not just a tribute to fashion, but a high-tech protective system. It combined the ideal material, the right color, and a well-thought-out cut. This second skin allowed them to feel comfortable even under the scorching rays of the sun. If you think this fact about ancient Egyptian clothing is truly ingenious, like this video. What if everything you've been taught about their mud houses doesn't tell the whole story? When we hear clay house, we imagine something primitive. But for Egypt, adobe bricks made from Nile silt and straw were a high-tech material, ideal for their climate. The main secret of this material is its enormous thermal mass. During the day when the sun was at its zenith, the thick clay walls slowly absorbed heat from outside. They acted as a heat accumulator, preventing the heat from entering the rooms. While the heat outside was stifling, the adobe houses remained relatively cool inside. This effect was not instantaneous but lasted for many hours. A wall half a meter thick could absorb heat throughout the day. At night, the opposite process took place. When the temperature of the desert air dropped sharply, the heat accumulated during the day began to slowly radiate from the walls. This heat went both outside and inside the house, warming the rooms and smoothing out the daily temperature difference. As a result, the microclimate inside such dwellings was surprisingly stable and comfortable. During the day, it was cooler than outside, and at night it was warmer. It was a passive but incredibly effective air conditioning mechanism. This material was available to absolutely everyone. Nile silt was abundant after each flood, and straw remained after the harvest. This made construction widespread and inexpensive, allowing the entire population to enjoy the benefits of this technology. The straw added to the clay acted as reinforcement. It made the bricks stronger and prevented them from cracking as they dried. This simple but ingenious solution made it possible to build sturdy, multi-story houses. In comparison, the stone that the Egyptians used for temples and tombs has different thermal conductivity. It heats up faster and cools down faster, creating less comfortable conditions. That is why eternal stone was rarely used for residential building. But the material is only the beginning. Brick alone would not have worked without ingenious planning. In the next chapter, you will learn how the Egyptians designed their houses to literally catch the wind. Do you think this knowledge was intuitive or the result of precise calculations? The Egyptians' most ingenious solutions for combating the heat were not related to materials, but to form. They understood that the main way to cool down was to make the air move. All of their residential architecture was designed to create natural ventilation. The center of any wealthy home was an open courtyard. It was not just a recreation area, but the heart of the home's climate control system. During the day, the sun heated the air in the courtyard. The hot air rose, pulling cooler air from the interior rooms of the house with it. This process created a constant, albeit slow movement of air throughout the dwelling. To enhance this effect, the Egyptians invented the malkaf, or wine catcher. It was an ingenious device on the roof of the house, similar to a large air intake. It was always oriented to the north, toward the prevailing cool winds blowing from the Mediterranean Sea. The malkaf captured this wind at a height where it was cleaner and cooler and directed it down a special shaft. The air entered the lower rooms of the house, displacing the warm air. This system created a constant draft that cooled not only the room itself, but also the people inside it. It was a true passive air conditioner, operating solely on the laws of physics and proper design. The windows in Egyptian houses were small and located high under the ceiling. This was done intentionally. The small size prevented direct sunlight from entering, and the high location helped the hot air, which always accumulates at the top, to escape unhindered. These windows were often covered with grills or damp mats. Passing through the damp fabric, the hot outside air was cooled by the evaporation of water. This is another example of the use of the principle of evaporative cooling. Guess what was the most important living space in an Egyptian house, which is hardly used for that purpose today? It was the roof. In a desert climate, a flat roof was transformed from a simple ceiling. During the day, the roof took the brunt of the sun. But when darkness fell, it cooled very quickly, radiating the accumulated heat into the night sky. Soon it became the coolest place in the whole house. That is why Egyptians practiced sleeping on rooftops en masse. Entire families carried their mats upstairs to sleep under the open sky, enjoying the cool night air. Lightweight awnings or gazebos were built on the roofs to provide shade without obstructing air circulation. To protect themselves from the sun during the day, the Egyptians actively used color. The exterior walls of houses and temples were almost always covered with white plaster or painted white. This simple solution was of great importance. White, as we know, has a high reflective capacity, or albedo. It reflected most of the sun's rays, preventing them from being absorbed and heating the thickness of the wall. This significantly reduced the load on the thermal mass of the building. Light colors also prevailed inside the rooms. This was done not only for coolness, but also for better lighting. Since the windows were small, light-colored walls helped to better scatter the little light that penetrated inside, making the rooms visually more spacious. The thickness of the walls, which we mentioned earlier, also played a role. The massive walls of temples and tombs made of stone created areas of absolute coolness. Inside such structures, the temperature was almost constant throughout the year, which gave a feeling of peace and eternity. Even in simple dwellings, the walls were thick. This was necessary not only for cooling, but also for the strength of the adobe brick structure. As a result, the house turned into a real thermos, keeping the interior cool. All these elements, the functional roof, white color, and thick walls, were not separate tricks, but part of a single, well-thought-out system. They complemented each other, creating the most comfortable environment for living. But even the perfect house is useless if you have to work in the midday sun. In the next chapter, we will see how the Egyptians organized their daily routine to avoid the peak heat. Which of these architectural tricks do you find the most ingenious? The ingenuity of the Egyptians was evident not only in construction, but also in the organization of time. They understood perfectly well that it was impossible to work productively under the midday sun. Therefore, their entire social and working life was synchronized with the daily movement of the sun. The working day for most of the population, especially those who worked outdoors, began very early. Farmers, builders, and craftsmen went to their workplaces before dawn to take advantage of the coolest hours of the morning. They worked intensively for several hours until the sun began to beat down too strongly. By the time the heat peaked, usually around noon, most of the hard work had already been done. During the hottest hours of the day, life in Egypt came to a standstill. It was a time that we would now call siesta. People left the fields and construction sites for the shade of their homes, the coolness of their courtyards, or the shelter of awning. It was a time for rest, light meals, and sleep. This respite allowed the body to recover and avoid dangerous overheating. It was a generally accepted norm, not a sign of laziness. When the sun began to set and the heat subsided, the second phase of activity began. People returned to their work and labored for several more hours in the comfortable evening coolness. Social life was also shifted to the evening hours. Meetings, celebrations, and communication with neighbors took place after sunset. Cool nights were a time for feasts and entertainment, as we often see in frescoes. Of course, such a schedule was not equally accessible to everyone. But even in professions that required constant presence, such as guards or priests, frequent shifts and access to shade and water were provided. Even the construction of the Great Pyramids was organized with the climate in mind. The main work of moving stone blocks was often carried out not during the hottest season, but during the Nile flood period, when temperatures were lower. This adaptation of the daily routine was no less important than architecture or clothing. It demonstrates a deep understanding of the body and the environment. The Egyptians did not go against nature, but followed its rhythms. In addition to the Nile, water in small forms, especially in combination with clay, played a huge role in the daily life of the Egyptians. They discovered and actively used the principle of evaporative cooling, not only in architecture, but also in everyday life. The most striking example of this technology was the zir, a large porous clay jug for storing drinking water. It was never glazed, and therein lay the secret. The porous clay allowed a small amount of water to seep out. This water, appearing on the outer surface of the jug, evaporated under the influence of the dry desert air. The evaporation process, as we know, requires energy. As a result, the water inside the zira became significantly colder than the ambient air temperature. The difference could reach 10 to 15 degrees. This allowed the Egyptians to drink cool, refreshing water. Zirs were usually placed in a shaded, well-ventilated area to enhance the evaporation effect. They were often placed at the entrance to the house or in the courtyard so that everyone had access to them. The same principle was used to cool rooms. Wet reed mats or linen fabrics were hung on windows or doorways. The air passing through them was cooled and humidified. Personal hygiene was another way to combat the heat. The Egyptians were obsessed with cleanliness. They regularly bathed using water from the Nile or canals. This not only cleansed but also instantly cooled the body. Wealthy Egyptians had special bathrooms in their homes where servants poured water from jugs over them. For ordinary people, public baths and riverbanks were the usual places for this procedure. Body temperature was controlled not only externally, but also internally. The Egyptians intuitively or empirically developed a diet that was ideal for living in a hot climate. Their diet was light and promoted hydration. The basis of their diet was bread and beer. It may seem surprising, but Egyptian beer, or henket, was very different from modern beer. It was thick, nutritious, and low in alcohol, more like a liquid porridge. This beer was not so much an intoxicating drink as an important source of calories, B vitamins, and, most importantly, fluids. It was excellent for quenching thirst and maintaining strength without overloading the digestive system. The Egyptians consumed large amounts of water, rich fruits and vegetables. Their diet included onions, garlic, cucumbers, and lettuce. Melons and watermelons were especially prized as excellent sources of moisture. Dates and figs, both fresh and dried, were an important source of quick energy. They allowed people to quickly regain their strength without resorting to heavy food. The main source of protein was fish from the Nile, as well as poultry. Meat, especially beef, was food for holidays or for the wealthy. A light, predominantly plant-based and fish-based diet required less energy to digest. The digestive process itself generates internal heat. Heavy, fatty, and meaty foods force the body to work harder, raising body temperature. The Egyptian diet avoided this unnecessary heat load. Last but not least, another aspect of Egyptian survival was their famous personal care system. What we today perceive as part of fashion or ritual, the most famous element was thick black eyeliner, or kohl. It was worn by both men and women. This cosmetic, made from ground galena, was not just a decoration. The black paint around the eyes worked like sunglasses. It absorbed excess sunlight and sharply reduced glare reflected from light sand in water. This protected the eyes and allowed for better vision in conditions of dazzling brightness. Many Egyptians, especially those from the upper classes, shaved their heads. This was primarily a matter of hygiene in a hot climate, but a bare head was vulnerable to direct sunlight. The solution was elaborate wigs. Paradoxically, the wig functioned like a hat. It created an air layer above the scalp, which insulated it from direct heat. At the same time, the wig could be removed indoors, allowing the head to rest and cool down. To protect the skin itself from the drying sun and dry wind, the Egyptians actively used various oils and ointments. They rubbed them into the body to maintain skin elasticity and prevent dehydration. We can see that the survival of the Egyptians in the desert was not a miracle. It was the result of thousands of years of adaptation and ingenious inventiveness. They did not rely on one thing, but created a complex system where each element supported the other. This story is not about struggle, but about harmony. The ancient Egyptians did not conquer the desert. They learned to live in it, respecting its laws and using its features to their advantage. Their legacy is not only the pyramids, but also a great lesson in intelligent adaptation to the environment. What other topics from the lives of ancient civilizations would you like us to cover in future videos? Share your ideas in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel